Joining me now is former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and MSNBC Chief International Analyst, Admiral James Stavridis. Admiral, thanks for joining me. We're learning today that Israel is withdrawing all ground troops from southern Gaza. Right now, it's unclear whether the pullback will delay the expected invasion of Rafah. This is what National Security Advisor John Kirby had to say about it earlier.
It's hard to know exactly what that tells us right now. This was just an announcement that they made. I'd certainly let them speak to their operations as we understand it and through their public announcements. It is really just about rest and refit for these troops that have been on the ground for 4 months and not necessarily, that we can tell, indicative of some coming new operation for these troops. They've been on the ground for 4 months. The word we're getting is they're tired. They need to be refit.
Is your read on this the same?
I would say the troops are being withdrawn for 3 reasons. Number one is what John Kirby just said. He didn't also make the point Israel is largely a reserve army. So really 6 months ago, most of these troops were called up. These are butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, so to speak. Their shops are closed, their ways of business not working. So they have got to get these reservists back into civilian life. So there's an economic component. Certainly rest and refit, I suppose, is part of it. I think, frankly, the major thing is the pressure that the Biden administration is putting on Israel. And the reason the Biden team is doing so is because of international pressure. All of that is working together. And then finally, Ali, it's also the pressure from within Israel on the overall campaign, the tenor of it, the hostages, the lack of a ceasefire to bring hostages home, seeing big demonstrations in Israel. I think it's a combination of all 3.
Yeah, and we've seen our colleague Hala Garani on the ground even covering one of those protests yesterday. And one of those folks told her, I would be good if Netanyahu would negotiate for the hostages' release first, and then the ceasefire talks can come later. But the other thing that U.S. officials are on high alert for is that Iran may launch an attack on Israel or American troops in the region, that in retaliation for an Israeli strike on the Iranian consulate in Syria. That killed several senior officials last week. Iran today now warning that none of Israel's embassies are safe anymore and that confrontation with Israel is its, quote, legitimate and legal right. Is Iran now seeking to make this a wider conflict in the region?
No, I don't think so, Ali. Note the precision of that statement from Tehran that Israeli embassies are no longer safe. That's because, of course, the Iranian embassy in Damascus was attacked by Israel. I think Israel is signaling that they intend to respond proportionally, go after an Israeli embassy somewhere. I think they're very deliberately saying, we're not going to unleash Hezbollah and hundreds of thousands of surface-to-surface missiles. Iran, believe me, does not want a wider war because they know it would ultimately drag the United States into it. That would be disastrous ultimately for the Iranian armed forces. So I think look for Iran to respond, certainly militarily, over the next 5 to 10 days. It'll probably be fairly precise and directed against an Israeli embassy. Unfortunately, those folks should be on high alert.
Certainly. And today, of course, marks 6 months from the start of the war. You've got ongoing negotiations in Cairo to once again attempt to reach a ceasefire deal. What do you think the outcome of this one is going to be?
Well, I've said from the beginning, watch the location of U.S. Director of the CIA, former Ambassador Bill Burns, who's not only our nation's spy master, he's a career-long diplomat, former U.S. ambassador both to Moscow and to Amman, Jordan. He is very experienced. Where is Bill Burns? He's in Cairo. That tells you that things are getting closer. And as I tie that to the Israeli announcement of walking troops back, I go into the week somewhat hopeful that a deal could be close. I think it's still 50-50 at best, but that's a lot better than the 0 chance many of us felt a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. Admiral James Stavridis, thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.